Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Yuna and today I am so freaking excited because I am doing my very first reading vlog. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to format my reading vlogs. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of the behind the scenes types of things, clips of me just kind of around the house, or if I'm going to stick mostly to just talking about the books as I'm reading, but we'll see. I'm excited to experiment and see what feels good. If you watched a bunch of my other videos, you may already know that today's reading vlog, my first ever reading vlog, is going to be about me trying to find a 5-star romantasy. Now listen, I love love. I love romance. I love shipping. I love yearning. I love well-written spice. I love some emotionally charged smut. And I also love fantasy. I love magic. I love world building. I love folklore. I love fantastical creatures. That's all my jam. So you would think the meeting of those two as romantasy or romance forward fantasy would fit right into what I enjoy, but I actually have a really hard time finding romantasy or romance heavy fantasy that I love. I've yet to find one that I thought was a 5-star home run. I think most of the romantasy that I've read has ended up being in like the 3-ish star range, books that I liked okay but didn't stand out to me or that I had a lot of issues with. I'm going to use the term romantasy just to streamline things, but know that for me that includes things like very romance forward fantasy or romance centric fantasy that might not necessarily be mainstream romantasy. I think that a lot of popular mainstream romantasy tends to use a lot of Eurocentric heteronormative tropes that just don't always do it for me. Let me start by sharing some of the things that I personally don't enjoy in a romantasy. I don't like insta-love. I don't like being told that they're in love but not being shown that or really feeling that in the text and the story, just constantly being told this is a romance, they're in love, these are star-crossed lovers. I don't like when I don't have a good sense of the characters as individuals before being introduced to the romance. I don't want them to just be there as a vessel for the romance. I want to be attached to them as individuals. I also cringe when the characters, assuming it's a straight romance, are described as, you know, the woman is so tiny, smallest woman you've ever seen, but still good boobs and a nice ass, but so tiny, so waif. And when the man is just so large, so big, biggest, beefiest, most muscular man you've ever seen with the squarest jaw that's ever walked the earth. And of course, he has to be able to wrap his hands around her almost non-existent waist. And that's not to say that you can't have those types of characters or use those tropes and still write an incredible story. Of course you could. I just find that the trend is that when those are the types of characters or framings or tropes that are used, I usually don't love the story attached. So if I were to cook up the framework for a romantasy that I think I could really love, I would need the following things. I would want strong, descriptive, lyrical, sophisticated prose. I would want layered and thoughtful world building that feels alive. I would want a slowly built up romance with tension and a lot of groundwork laid before the romantic element is ever really introduced. And I would absolutely want to appreciate the complexity of the individual characters separately, even before the romance happens. And if I can get a little greedy, I would love for there to be some thought-provoking themes also incorporated. Now, it really frustrates me when I see dialogue about romantasy and I see people asking for more of these things from romantasy as a genre and people saying, well, that's not what romantasy is about. You don't read romantasy because you want those things. But I don't get it. Why not? There's literally no reason that we can't expect some of the same things from romantasy as we do from other fantasy novels or even literary fiction. We want thematic depth. We want complex characters. We want believable dialogue. We want slowly built up romance and emotionally charged sexuality. Like, why can't we have it all? So all that to say, the disclaimer is that I am hard to please when it comes to romance or romantasy, and I have some high expectations, but I know there's a book out there that's going to be a 5-star romantasy read for me. I don't know how long this is going to take or how many of these romantasy reading vlogs I'm going to have to make because I am pretty stingy with my 5-star ratings, but who knows, maybe I'll get really lucky and in this first vlog I will find a 5-star read. So let's jump into it. For this first romantasy reading vlog, I'm going to be reading Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross and The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. I honestly don't know too much about these books, but I will give a brief overview. Wild Reverence is a standalone prequel that exists in the same world as her Letters of Enchantment duology that has The Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. I don't know really anything about the plot. I know that there are gods and there are mortals, and that's about all I know about this book. I've mentioned in other videos that I've read 2 of her other duologies. I've read the Letters of Enchantment and the Elements of Cadence duologies, And I have mixed feelings about Rebecca Ross's writing. I tend to enjoy her prose. I think it's very descriptive and easy to read. But I've heard from other people who didn't love her other works that this is her strongest and that they really love this book. So I'm hoping that I have the same experience and that this becomes my new favorite Rebecca Ross book. The other book that I'm going to be reading is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow, and I'm really excited about this one. I also don't really know very much about it. All I know is there is a lady knight and that there's some time shenanigans happening. I do plan to first read The Six Deaths of the Saint. Six Deaths of the Saint. I cannot say that title. I'm going to read The Six Deaths of the Saint before I get to The Everlasting because that is a short story that was expanded to become this book. My current plan for the vlog is to start with Wild Reverence. I will read to about the halfway point, come in and give you my thoughts at that stage in the book, and then finish the book and then come back for my final thoughts. And then I'll move on to The Everlasting and essentially do the same thing. I don't want to jinx anything, but if I had to make a prediction, I think that I will probably love The Everlasting a little more than I love Wild Reverence, but that's just based on my previous experience with Rebecca Ross. But like I said, people have been saying this is her best work yet, so maybe that's unfair of me. We will see. I'm going to get started with Wild Reverence, so wish me luck. I will see you soon.
Hey, baby. Oh, he's so warm in the sun. So she has made multiple appearances in a number of my videos, so you might recognize her, but this is Lucy. She is my almost 17-year-old cat. She used to be a barn cat at the stable where I rode, and they were getting rid of her because she'd just gotten old and wasn't like a great mouser. So I brought her home about 4 years ago. But I've known her since she was a kitten. She came to the stables when she was like a tiny little baby kitten. So I've known her for most of her life, but she's only been living with me in retirement for about 4 years now. And she is spoiled rotten. It's kind of crazy. She is just the sweetest and gentlest and most tolerant cat that I've ever met. In 17 years, I've never seen her hiss at a person. I've never seen her swipe at a person. I've never seen her try to bite or just generally be like angry or aggressive at anyone. If she's unhappy with a situation, she just kind of deals with it. She sucks it up and lets you do whatever, or she walks away. But she's just so gentle. I would trust her with anybody. People who are nervous around cats or worried about getting swiped at or things like that, I just let them do whatever they want with Lucy because she's just the best little lady. And fun fact, her name Lucy is short for Lucifer, but she's an absolute angel. For I think as long as she's been in my videos, you've probably seen her with like a shirt on or a cone on, and that's because she is having some sort of skin issue. We suspect that she's having a type of reaction to one of the medications she's on. We've been trying different things for a while now, for literally at this point half a year. We've been trying different topicals, different antihistamines, different medications for allergies and itchies, and nothing's really helped. We're hoping we can find a solution soon. We're still trying a bunch of things, but all that to say, poor lady is very itchy, and that is why she is always in a shirt. She's very good about it. Like I said, she just kind of tolerates pretty much anything, but this is my baby. I love her so much. She's an angel. My best little girl. I want to introduce you to my two little ratty boys. I've had rats for a long time and I've had dozens of rats, but right now I have this little guy, and where are you? This little boy. He's so cute. So this Siamese boy, his name is Blink, and this is Mimic, the black and white one. Oh, thank you for the kisses. This is Mimic. They're so sweet. He is such a sleepy, sweet, snuggly, cuddly little man. He's so great. I love him. He just loves to kind of sit next to you and get pets, and he'll hang out for hours. Thank you for the kisses. What a sweet boy. Thank you. Oh, kissies.
It's very sweet. Thank you very much.
People ask about pet rats if they are, if they bite and things like that. They really don't. They're kind of like dogs and cats. Like, they won't bite unless you, I don't know, give them a reason to. They're very handleable. Like, they're very sweet.
All right, quick little check-in. I'm only about 90 pages in, and the book is over 500 pages, so I'm not even a fifth of the way through. I'm less than 20% in. But so far, I am really enjoying it. We've met the two main characters, Matilda and the boy who I'm assuming is going to end up being the love interest, Vincent. They've so far only really interacted through dreams and only had, I think, one in-person meeting. But I'm enjoying that. I really like the prose, but I was never worried about that. I know I've said I've had issues with Rebecca Ross's books, her duologies in the past, but one thing I've never had complaints about is her writing style. I think it's really lovely and lyrical and easy to read. I love the way she describes things. I'm really liking getting introduced to the different gods and the way their magics work. I won't get too into the characters or plot or anything like that yet. I will do that more at the midway check-in, which I think I still have like 150 or 175 pages before I get to that point. But so far, I am really enjoying it. I haven't fallen in love with Matilda or Vincent yet, but it's still early on, and I'm sure there's plenty of time for that to happen. So I'm going to keep on reading this. It's going to be a mix of physical reading and audiobook listening. So I'll see how much footage I end up getting of me doing chores or art or whatever it is while I'm listening to the audiobook. But I think the next time I check in is going to be at the midway point. So I will see you in just a minute.
Little monster.
All right, I am popping on for my midway check-in for the Wild Reverence. I am right at about the halfway point. I'm just a little over halfway through the book, and so far I'm enjoying it. I'm going to start with giving an overview of the story and the premise and characters, since now I have a better idea of what's going on. The book takes place, like I said, in the same universe as the Letters of Enchantment duology, and in this world there are a host of gods split between the ones that live underground in the underling realm and those that live above ground in what's called the skyward realm. These gods have manifestations in constellations in the sky, and their power is tied to how many stars are in their constellations. The more stars, the more powerful. Each of the gods have different domains or powers, such as god of spring, god of war, god of iron, god of the wind, and the gods can steal each other's powers by stealing their stars. The main character and narrator is Matilda, who is the child of an underling goddess and a skyward god. She's right about in the middle in terms of how powerful she is, and she is the god of messages, or a herald goddess. So she is actually able to travel between realms freely, which not all gods can do. When she's young, she makes a connection with a young human mortal boy named Vincent because he is somehow dreaming of her before they've even ever actually met. They start to develop a friendship this way, but they end up losing contact for reasons that I will go into in the spoiler section. Right now in the story, they are coming back together and starting to develop a relationship while trying to navigate politics and betrayal and schemes of both the mortal and immortal kind. So that's the spoiler-free sort of overview of what the book is about and where I'm at. But now I'm about to go into the spoiler section, so I'm going to be going over some specific plot points and talking about my thoughts. So the reason that Matilda loses contact with Vincent is because she has to flee from the underling realm when her mother is murdered. She goes to seek sanctuary and shelter in the Skyward Realm with her father, and she's in hiding there essentially for about 13-ish years. During this time, what Matilda doesn't know is that Vincent runs into trouble when his uncle betrays his family, kills his father, and is trying to take over the lands and throne of Vincent's family. So during this time, Vincent sends a bunch of prayers reaching out to Matilda, begging for her help, but these prayers end up getting sent as messages to the underling realm, and because Matilda is in hiding in the Skyward Realm, she never knows that Vincent has been trying to reach out to her. So she doesn't respond to these messages, obviously, and he becomes disillusioned, and the two of them lose contact and don't really think about each other for about the 13 years that Matilda's in hiding. Eventually, though, Matilda does come out of hiding. She returns to the underling realm and has to deliver a message to Vincent, which is how they become reconnected. Matilda finds Vincent in a pickle, though, because his uncle is still after his land. So Matilda proposes to help Vincent by doing a fake marriage scenario to trick the uncle into backing down because he's not going to want to go toe-to-toe with the goddess and her god and goddess allies. When she returned to the underling realm, she did find out about the prayers that Vincent had sent, and she feels guilty. So she is now here trying to make amends, and that is why she's trying to help him with this fake marriage scenario. So let's talk about some of the strengths and things I'm really enjoying about the story so far. I think that Rebecca Ross's writing is consistently lovely and descriptive. If you like flowery, poetic descriptions and language, you'd probably really enjoy her writing style. I also think the reading style is very easy to read. It's not poetic in a way that I think bogs it down or makes it too dense to be easily digestible. I'll read you a couple lines that I think are representative of her sort of lyrical writing style. I drew a sharp breath. I could taste a hint of his magic. Rainfall, crushed lilies, damp, warm soil, pollen on rose petals. I can smell your essence, and it is one that I have never encountered before. He leaned closer, drawing a deep inhale. You are parchment, ink, and cloves. You are water dripping down stone and the smoke of a burning scroll. You are something deeper, darker still. Something I am not sure how to describe, which means you came from the realm far below. The only place I have never been. I also really love some of the descriptions of the gods. Now, some of the gods are described just as kind of being hot people, but there are some that are less human, and those are my favorites. The ground rumbled, again and again, like the tread of heavy feet. The gatekeeper at last appeared through the mist to meet us. She was a giantess, a wizened crone with long silver hair. She had one opaque eye with a milky blue iris, dark pupil, and long lashes. Her face looked chiseled from pale rocks, the facets harsh and bold, as if the sculptor had been in a hurry while forming her features. Her teeth were blood-stained and filed into sharpened points, and her dress was gray, gathering over one shoulder with a knot made of white and black hair. I love that. I love how creepy that is. And I love that Matilda and Vincent are the same height. We do not have any tiny girl, giant man syndrome here, thank God. Now for some of the things I'm a little apprehensive about. I don't want to say that I'm not enjoying these aspects of the book because, again, we're only about halfway, so I have to finish reading the second half of the book. But these are just things that I am keeping my eye on, or things that are keeping me from saying that I love the book just yet. We're at the halfway point, and I can't really say that I have a strong grasp of either Matilda or Vincent's characters. With Matilda, she of course has personality traits, but she doesn't feel particularly vivid or memorable to me as of now. She's not offensive or annoying or anything like that, but yeah, there's just nothing about her that is grabbing me at the moment. She feels like she could honestly at this point be replaced by a lot of other female main characters from fantasy or romantasy books, and I wouldn't really notice the difference. Vincent so far is fine, but we really haven't spent much time with him. Like I said, for most of the first part of the book, they were separated and have only recently reconnected. So yeah, I just don't have much of an opinion of him at this point. The romance at this point feels forced because it literally is. They're in a fake marriage scenario. Right now, they're pretending to be in love in front of people and behind closed doors trying to get to know each other and maybe develop an actual relationship. But at this point, there's not a romantic relationship that I'm really invested in or rooting for. Yes, they knew each other as kids, but they were very fleeting interactions, and it was just a couple of dreams that he had that she was in, and one real life interaction. So there's not a whole lot that was there as a foundation, to be honest. So we're still building the relationship at this point. My current opinion, factoring all that in, is that I am enjoying the book. I like it, but I would not say I love it at this point. But I am looking forward to seeing how the relationship progresses, and I'm hoping that I get a stronger sense of them as individuals and of them as a couple before the book is over. I'm going to predict right now that Matilda definitely has something to do with those typewriters and the magic of the typewriters that show up in the Divine Rivals duology. She is the goddess of messages. She is a herald, so it would make absolute sense if she had something to do with those typewriters and why the two characters in those books were able to send messages to each other. So I'm going to keep reading this book. I might come in around the 75% mark for a short informal update. I'm not sure. Or the next time you see me might be when I finish the book. But either way, wish me luck. I hope I come back and have rave reviews. I am back and I have officially finished Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. If you watched any of my updates in the check-ins, then this probably isn't a surprise to you, but this, alas, is not my 5-star romantasy. I just finished this book, so this might change once I've had some time to sit and kind of be with my thoughts on it. But I think that right now I would give this book like a solid 3 stars. For those of you who don't know, I have a pretty loose rating system, but generally a 3-star book for me is one that I liked. I thought it was a good book. I had issues with it, and I would only recommend it selectively or with disclaimers. But it's not a book I hated. It's not a book I loved. It's just kind of in the middle. And that's pretty much where this sits for me. A 4-star book is a book I love, and a 5-star book is like, this is a book that changed my life. I'm never going to stop talking about it. I'm going to beg people to read it. And although it wasn't a bad book, this certainly wasn't that for me. I'm not going to do an exhaustive summary and talk about all of the plot points and everything that happened, but when I had come for my midway check-in, I said that Matilda and Vincent had only recently reconnected and were now starting this fake marriage and getting to know each other again. And essentially for the second half of the book, Matilda and Vincent spend very little time together. They kind of have snatches of time, like a day or two here, or like a couple hours here. But most of the book in the second half and the first half, they spend separated by different forces. At the end of the book, after a long 7-year separation because of reasons, Matilda and Vincent are able to reunite, and they essentially spend the rest of Vincent's lifetime together. Matilda is obviously a goddess and she's immortal, but they spend the rest of his life together and in love. Rebecca Ross's writing continued to be, nice and descriptive and easy to read, but for me, it didn't cover up the fact that I just felt like the relationship was rather unconvincing, and neither of the main characters felt very strongly developed. This is one of those cases where they repeatedly talk about how their fates are interwoven, or there's this magical pull that's beyond their own understanding. There's a fated love, right? Which is all well and good, but at the end of the day, beyond that, I couldn't really tell what it was that was keeping these two people together, or what the connection was based on, or what they actually liked about each other. I've read 5 of Rebecca Ross's books now, 2 duologies and the standalone, and I have to say that I feel like Rebecca Ross relies too much on forced separation scenarios in order to try to create tension or a sense of yearning in a couple. It's almost like she often equates forced separation and that distance as a sort of slow burn, but for me, that's not what I mean when I say slow burn. When I say slow burn, I mean I want to see them get to know each other. I want to see them spend time together and organically build a relationship. I want to see them talking and bickering and learning to trust each other, all of that good stuff, even if that connection is bolstered by some sort of magic, some sort of fated destiny. I still need that real connection. But for the vast majority of this book, they're just having these very short sort of stolen moments or fleeting interactions, and then they spend so much. I would argue that probably 75% of this book, if not more, they spend separately or forced to be apart. And for me, that doesn't effectively create tension. That doesn't effectively create a sense of slow development. Characters being apart, that only creates tension if there's a connection, right? Like I have to be pulling something apart for there to be tension. But because I never felt like they were that strongly connected, them being apart, it wasn't tension, it was just distance. In the Divine Rivals duology, the main couple is repeatedly kept apart by things like kidnapping or amnesia. And in the Elements of Cadence duology, which I prefer, I like that more than any of her other works, there is a main couple and a secondary couple, and both of them are, again, repeatedly separated and forced to spend large chunks of the books apart because of outside circumstances. And I'm not saying those things can't happen at all or that they can't be used in an effective way in romantic relationships or romantic storylines, but I just feel like it's a little frustrating because that seems to be Rebecca Ross's sort of main way of creating conflict. And I personally think that the way she does it just sort of messes with the momentum and makes me feel like the romance isn't really going anywhere. I'm not going to read them to you or look for them or anything, but there are multiple passages in the book where either Matilda or Vincent are expressing how deeply and truly and insanely in love they are with each other and how they would do anything to be with the other, how they've stolen each other's souls. And to me, I'm like, you've spoken like 4 sentences to each other and you barely know each other. What is the basis for that? Like, I get attraction, I get interest, I get being drawn to someone because of something, but to jump from some romantic interest and being attracted to someone to being eternal soulmates, there has to be more than I got out of this book. So personally, this is not the winner for me, and I don't know that Rebecca Ross and I are clicking. I feel like I've read enough of her works to have an idea of sort of her strengths and weaknesses, and who knows, I might continue to read what she puts out because they're easy enough reads, but I don't tend to love her works, and unfortunately this did not change my opinion. But I'm not giving up on my search. I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to move on to The Everlasting. Actually, I'm going to read the short story Six Deaths of the Saint first. I recently read one of her other short stories, what's it called? The Knight and the Butcher Bird. I actually loved that. I was a little worried because I read the Fractured Fable series and I did not like the style of writing in that. I mentioned in my wrap up that it felt very modern and pop culture-y in a way that I wasn't really enjoying. So I got nervous because I was like, oh no, if this is just her writing style in general, we might not be vibing. But The Knight and the Butcher Bird, I liked a lot more, so it gave me hope. I actually think I'm just going to hop over the sofa now with Lucy and read the short story. I might come back and give you my thoughts on that, or maybe the next time you see me will be when I have already started reading The Everlasting. I'm not sure. I don't know what the flow of these vlogs is because this is my first one, but I might come back for some thoughts on the story, or again, maybe you'll see some behind the scenes when I'm already a quarter of the way-ish through The Everlasting. But wish me luck. I'm really hoping that this is the one. Alright, so I just finished the story and damn, that was really good. This is only 29 pages and Alex Hero made every single freaking word count. I don't want to rag on The Wild Reverence too much because like I said, I didn't think it was a bad book, but in 29 pages, I was more invested in these characters and their connection than I was in 520 pages of the Wild Reverence book. The writing and the story and the world was so tragic and haunting, and I really loved it. I just finished, so again I have to sit on my thoughts a little, but I'd probably give this 4 stars. I won't go too much into details, but the story is essentially about a woman who is repeatedly reborn and made to fight for this prince or king as a knight. The magic is very interesting, but it's not fully explained, which I love. There's just hazy sort of mystical quality to it. Actually, if any of you have seen the Japanese animated movie Millennium Actress, it kind of reminds me of that, the sort of eeriness of multiple identities. And if you haven't seen that movie, it's really trippy. I haven't seen it in over like 15 years, so I don't really remember if it's good, but it reminds me of this story. So if you like the vibes, maybe check out that movie. I'm not really sure how closely The Everlasting follows the story, if it's just sort of the general premise that gets transferred into The Everlasting, or if it's these exact characters, if it's a direct continuation. I have no freaking idea. There's some lines that I really loved, so I'm going to read a couple of them for you. I don't think out of context that these are going to be spoilers, but just in case I will put like a little something here. He pulled you down beside him in that tall grass and touched you in that heady secret way that transformed the brutal weapon of your body into mere flesh. It was like shucking plate armor after a long campaign and walking naked into a river, letting the current take you. It was like surrendering on the field and finding mercy. I love the part that says secret way that transformed the brutal weapon of your body into mere flesh. I love that line. Another line that I really liked. I know his desires by the pace of his breath and the tilt of his shoulders, by the shape of his jaw and the heat of his gaze. I know him, and in knowing him I love him, and in loving him I cannot do as he wishes. That's some good shit right there. I think I'll start the everlasting either later today or maybe tomorrow, but the next time you see me will most likely be when I am starting the everlasting, or maybe when I've gotten like 25% of the way through for a quick check-in. But yeah, this has me really excited to read it, because if it has the same amount of emotional impact and intrigue and heartbreakingness, I'll probably love it. I just sat down to start the everlasting, and this is my first time even reading the inner jacket cover of the book, and I had no idea that the Lady Knight's name is Una Everlasting. It's spelled UNA, so I don't know if it's pronounced Una or Una, but I'm just gonna go with Una because that's fun, and my name is Una. Okay, so I've only read a little bit of the book so far. I've only read the what? What? Hold on a second. I didn't know that there were illustrations in this book. This is stunning. What the heckin'? Are there more? I don't want to spoil my. Okay, I don't want to spoil myself. Yeah, I hadn't come across any of the illustrations yet. I just saw it when I was flipping through. Anyway, I've only read like the prologue bit and a little bit of the first chapter, but so far the writing is so beautiful. I have very high hopes. I'm not going to say too much because, again, I haven't read very much, and I will go into everything in the midway check-in, but my god, I have really high hopes for this.
수줍어요. 영화 배우들은 어떻게 찍나?
어색해?
응.
왜 귀여워, 엄마?
짠.
Okay, so I don't know how well you're going to be able to see or how much is even in frame, but I am currently at my parents' house, like I said, and I am looking at my old bookshelf that has a lot of my books from when I was younger, and over here is my thoroughbred section. If you are a horse girl or a horse kid growing up, then there's no way you haven't heard of the Thoroughbred series, but it's essentially just a series about this family that raises and rides racehorses. I was obsessed with this series growing up. I could read like 10 of these books, I swear, in a few days. But I realized I can't find number one, which is absolutely like unacceptable. And if I can't find number one, it starts at number two. I don't know where the first one is, but
If I can't find number 1, I'm for sure going to buy it because I can't live my life knowing that I have an incomplete Thoroughbred series. And then above the Thoroughbred series, I have more of my horse books. I have the Heartland series. I don't know if anyone knows the TV show, but it's based on the book The Heartland series. And fun fact, this guy on the cover of Heartland number 4, which I think it's supposed to be Ty, that's Scott Disick. Like, which I think is so funny. He's the baby daddy for one of the Kardashians, and I think he's on their show or whatever. But yeah, that's a Kardashian baby daddy on the cover of my Heartland book, which is weird worlds colliding. But we have Heartland. I have the Unicorns of Balinor series, which incredible. Loved this as a kid. They're all out of order, which is kind of annoying. So let me fix that. So 2, 1. Yes. So this is the Unicorns of Balinor series. I think it's so pretty. Look at that. And then I just have a bunch of other random horse books. Behind I have the Saddle Club and other random horse books. I had a theme going. Horse books absolutely raised me when I was in like elementary school probably. And look what else I found. Look at these throwbacks. I have some random Animorphs books. Which numbers are these? I have 7 and 13. I have no idea where the rest of them are, but love the Animorphs.
Okay, so I'm about a quarter or maybe a third of the way through The Everlasting, and I'm just gonna do a quick update. It's not gonna be like a full midway update or anything, but yeah, I'm about a third, a quarter of the way through, and so far, I'm loving this book. I'm really enjoying it, and I am just like trying to pace myself so I don't devour it in one sitting so that I have something to include into a vlog, but it is so good. I'm having a great time. Also, I did listen to some of the audiobooks, so I know that her name is pronounced Una and not Yuna. So we don't have the same name, but that's fine. It's close enough. But so far, I'm loving the way that Una and Owen are characterized and are absolutely smashing through popular, hetero romantasy tropes, the way that they are described in terms of their characters, but also their physical appearances and sort of the roles that they're filling in the story. Incredible. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I also love the way that Alexi Harrow is slowly sort of rolling out the magic and the world building. It's not something that she's just sitting down and explaining to everyone at the beginning. She is letting it sort of unfold before you and allowing for space for the reader to maybe be confused or to have to piece things together, which again, I love. The writing, the prose itself is so stunning. I know I'd mentioned that I was nervous about the prose after reading some of her short stories, the novellas from the Fractured Fable series. I didn't love the writing style in those, but so far I'm loving the prose in this. There's kind of different styles of prose, and I'll go into that more at the midway update. I don't want to speak too soon because again, I'm not even halfway through the book yet, but I think that this could potentially be my 5-star romantasy if it kind of continues on the way that it has been going so far. I'm very, very stingy with my 5-star reads. If I rate a book 4 stars or 4.5 stars, that is essentially like an incredible book to me. A 5-star book to me is truly like a book that changed my life. I think that a good number of the books I had in my top books of 2025 list weren't even 5-star reads. They were between 4 to 5 stars. So we'll see. Even if I end up giving this a 4-star for a romantasy, that is honestly pretty good. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this ends up being my 5-star romantasy read, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. I will keep on reading and I will come back with some more thoughts for the halfway update. It is the same day. It's literally just been a couple hours, but I am back with my midway update, check-in, whatever you want to call it. It has been kind of funny trying to pace myself for these reading vlogs because typically I could read this book. I could have read Everlasting probably in like a day and a half with my reading speed if I really just sat down and put my mind to it. But because I want to have some footage and, spread out some of the things that I'm recording for the vlog, I'm trying to take it a little slower than my usual pace. But all that said, I have made it to the halfway point and I am so excited to share my thoughts because I have a lot of them. I'm going to break this up into a relatively spoiler-free section and then a section with spoilers. I mean, even in my relatively spoiler-free section, I am going to talk a little bit about some of the details. I think it's not anything that you wouldn't know by reading The Dust Jacket or just having a general idea of what the book is about. But just so you know, there'll be a spoiler-free-ish section and then a spoiler section. I said in my previous update that I'm really enjoying the book and that I was hopeful that this could potentially be my first 5-star romantasy, and I'm still really enjoying the book. I'm going to repeat the disclaimer that I gave that I give out 5-star ratings very, 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 very sparingly. I have to look at the numbers, but last year I read about 200 books and I probably only gave less than 10 5-star ratings. A bunch of the books that were on my top books of 2025 list weren't even 5 stars. They're probably 4 or 4.5. For me, anything above 4 star is an exceptional, spectacular book. It's just that I save my 5-star ratings for books that genuinely I feel like changed my life, did something to the chemistry of my being. So even if this book got a 4 or 4.5 stars, I would consider that a win. But I'm not saying that it can't get a 5-star. I'm just saying that if for whatever reason it doesn't get a 5-star and I give it like a 4-star or something, I don't want people to think that I dislike the book. But I'm getting ahead of myself already because I'm only halfway through the book. So let's take it back to talking about the book. I went into this not knowing very much about the premise, so I just want to give a little bit of an overview about what the book is about. So this book is the story of Owen, who is this nervous scholar, and the legendary figure who he is obsessed with, Una Everlasting. Sir Una the Everlasting is a almost mythical figure who is tied with the origins of the country that Owen lives in, Dominion. Through some magic that has yet to be explained to me in the book, and I don't know, may never be explained, which would be fine, Owen is sent back repeatedly in time to the time of Una Everlasting to actually encounter that figure and be a part of her tale. Again, this is the spoiler-free-ish section, so I will save any more about the plot and any specifics and also my thoughts on this book so far compared to The Six Deaths of the Saint. I will save all of that for the spoiler section. Long story short, I'm loving this book. First of all, the prose is delicious. I was worried after reading the Fractured Fable series, which is written in this very modern, sort of satirical, humorous tone, that I wasn't going to enjoy The Everlasting if it was written in that same style. But it is quite different. There is still humor and there is some sort of snarkiness in the prose, but overall it is balanced really well with this very epic lyrical type of writing. Even so, it is still surprisingly funny and I've laughed out loud multiple points. On page 19, towards the very beginning of the story, Owen gets a telegram from his dad that reads, "Would prefer to disown you in person, so don't die. Love, Dad." I knew she was at least intrigued, however, because she was taking the early train back to campus, and the only thing she hated more than her country was getting out of bed before 10 o'clock. So things like that. There's little moments of humor that I don't think are overdone and are interspersed really nicely between these more evocative and emotional passages. Another thing that I'm really enjoying about this book so far is the exploration of the truth behind historical or legendary figures and the way that these people and their legacies get used and manipulated by history or political powers. It's also really cool to see this book addressing some of the effects of conflict or power, because I feel like a lot of times you have in romantasies some sort of political conflict or some sort of military things going on, but you don't necessarily step back to see what the aftermath of those things are. In terms of magic and world building, I'm also really loving that Alex Hero is taking the approach of not over-explaining the nature of the magic or how things are happening. There's this strangeness to the narrative and the narrator's understanding of events and time because of the nature of the time shenanigans that are happening, and Harrow isn't afraid to leave those things a bit confusing and nebulous, and I love that. I love when an author respects their readers enough to be like, they don't need me to handhold them through every single detail. Now, all that is good and well, but what about the romance, right? Because this is a romantasy reading vlog. So far, I love the two main characters, Owen and Una, and the way that their characters are being built up and the way their relationship is developing. I said this in the last update, but I just really love the way that they're being described in terms of their personalities, in terms of their physicalities, their capabilities, and the roles that they're filling in the romance story. So far, they're flipping so much of the traditional hetero-Eurocentric romance traditions that you typically see in romantasy books, and I am living for it. Una is taller, she is bigger, she is broader, she's more masculine, and she's more physically capable. Owen is smaller than Una, and while he is capable in his own ways, he has this sort of timidness to him that I feel like you typically see more in women. Some of their interactions, which I won't go into detail here, just made me so happy and were so good because of how not traditionally romantasy they were in the way they were fulfilling their gender roles. And one of my complaints with Wild Reverence was that I didn't feel like either of the main characters were very strong as individuals, or that I didn't feel like I had a really good grasp of their motivations and their internal conflicts as people beyond their romantic interests. And that's not the case with this so far. I have a really good sense of the two people and their complexities and their motivations. I am invested in them as individuals, even if they weren't romantically involved. Okay, now it's time for the spoilers section. Be warned, spoilers ahead. I'm going to be reading some more passages in this section, and while I'm going to try to keep them relatively spoiler-free in terms of big plot events, just know that I'm going to be reading some things from further on in the book, so be aware. Where I've stopped in the book at the halfway point, chapter 14, it's essentially right after Una's point of view section. I don't know if she has multiple point of view sections in the book or if that's the only one, but whatever is the first one or the only one, that's what I've read just now. I mentioned how I'm really eating up the aspect of the book where we are exploring the truth behind history, and Owen comes from a time in Dominion's history where Una is this figure who is revered and beloved, and basically everyone is told how wonderful she was and how important she was to Dominion's founding. After traveling back in time, Owen is seeing how people are actually quite resentful and fearful of Una for being the Queen's Sword, for being this battering ram at the head of a force that essentially oppressed and is forcing them to live under a rule that they never signed up for. I think it makes her a really cool, complex character, and it's also just a really interesting dynamic to watch as Owen is trying to reconcile the image of this legendary woman that he has loved and researched and been kind of obsessed with his whole life, as he is simultaneously falling in love with the actual broken and frustrated and scarred Una before him. And guys, the romance between Owen and Una has me feeling all types of ways right now. In one sense, because of this repeated time cycle aspect of the magic in this book, they've already met and fallen in love and lived these events multiple countless times. But again, because of the nature of the magic, they don't seem to fully remember each other or remember that they've done this before, so they're falling in love multiple times. You can tell with the way that Harrow has written this that there are moments where they seem to remember each other and they seem to remember past lives or be aware of the cycle that they're caught in. They say phrases over again, or they just say things that indicate that there is some amount of memory seeping through. But overall, it is like they are meeting each other again and getting to know each other anew every time. I am just obsessed with the way Una is allowed to have these complex expressions of what would traditionally be considered masculine roles or masculine energy. And I love that she has a complicated understanding of and relationship with her own femininity and her own physical prowess and capability. Again, Una is physically bigger, taller, stronger. She's more capable of fighting than Owen is. And there are repeatedly instances in which Una takes a protector role or a caretaker role for Owen. I'm just swooning over the way the typical romantasy roles of a big strong man and a smaller nervous woman are flipped in this book. I'm going to read to you how Una is described when Owen first meets her, because it's not even like she's just this tall, muscular woman who is still very beautiful. None of those artists had done you justice. They had shied from the sheer scale of you, narrowing the great sweep of your shoulders, tapering your wrists and waist. They had made your face smooth and poreless, forever youthful, when in truth it was pocked and windburned with heavy lines carved between the brows. Your hair was not the sulfuric yellow of a saint of dominion, but the stark white of a snapped bone. A thick welt of scar fell through your left brow and into the eye beneath it, so that the pupil was misshapen, elongated into a black tear. You did not look like any kind of angel, yet still, I knew you. I absolutely love that. Another interaction I love and want to highlight is when Una and Owen are riding together on Una's horse. Once again, this is from Owen's perspective. I set one foot in the stirrup and you hauled me up as if I weighed nothing at all. You settled me in the saddle in front of you where one of the furs had been folded over the low pommel so that my thighs lay over yours, my back against your chest. Your arms reached easily around me for the reins, which you hardly seemed to need. The long muscles of your legs tensed in some secret language spoken only between you and the gelding, and he turned northward. I mean, how often do you read an interaction like that in a straight romantasy where the female main character hauls the man up like he weighed nothing at all? That is just a traditionally reserved for the other way around, and I just love that Alex wrote this way. Owen has these sort of PTSD/panic attack type episodes, and when they happen, Una comforts him and tries to bring him back to calmness. And I love these interactions for the emotional connection of it all, but also the way it's described, again, is very flipped in terms of the gender roles. I became aware distantly that you had dropped the reins. You bent yourself around me, your arms hard across my chest and ribs, your chin notched over my shoulder, your touch firm but careful, as if I were a cracked glass in danger of shattering. I could feel your heart against my spine. It beat steadily, sanely, a simple lesson mine couldn't seem to learn. I just love that mental image of this big woman, encasing the smaller man and calming him down and offering him this physical and emotional safe space. Love it. I'm also so into the way that Una's sexuality is written in this book. First of all, we know that she's queer. We know that she's been attracted to and has had sex with people of various genders. But additionally, I just really appreciate the way that her attraction and her sexuality is described. I feel like a lot of times, even if romantasy writers are writing women who are comfortable in their sexuality, who are very sex positive, they're still written in a way that feels very feminine. But that's not the case with Una. I just feel like the way that she desires Owen, or the way that she is aroused by him, is a very different expression of what a woman's sensuality and sexuality can look like. Whereas Owen, I think, is frequently described as being attracted to things like her mass or her muscles or her strength and even her callousness. And I just love that Hera wrote it that way, because she could have very easily been like, yes, Una is bigger, but Owen is still attracted to aspects of her femininity, or Una, yes, she is bigger, but she is attracted to aspects of Owen's masculinity, I don't know, like muscles or things like that. And that's not what she did, and I thank her for that. If I'm not making any sense, I'm going to read you some examples. This is from the section that's told from Una's point of view, and it's just a quick description of her looking at Owen. Whole armies had fled before me, and yet you, with your delicate hands and your doe's eyes, did not move. The sight sent a prickling, reckless heat through me. I wanted to teach you better, to shake you by the shoulders, to take your chin in my hand and cover your mouth with mine, hard enough to bruise. You would learn then, too late, to be afraid of me. And this here is Una's point of view as they are riding on the horse with Owen in front of her, like between her legs. It was bad enough the way I'd touched you earlier. You'd been seized by terror, shaking and stuttering, as some soldiers do, and I'd held you until it passed. But then the bone of your hip had felt so good against my palm that I'd kept it there, and entertained thoughts of such astonishing lechery that I'd had to dismount and walk to clear my head. And later there's a scene where they're at a bathhouse, and Owen is like, wait, we're about to take a bath together? And I think Una is interpreting this a bit like, oh, maybe he doesn't like strong women, he prefers feminine women. I turned around to wash, and your sentence ended on a sharp gasp. I felt your eyes on my bare back like a pair of live coals, hot and hungry. I did not think you liked soft-bodied women, after all, though it shouldn't have mattered to me. I stretched purposefully just to hear your breath catch. But you did not reach for me. Instead, you washed yourself with frantic urgency and left the room. I lingered for a while in the tepid gray water and let one hand slip between my legs, thinking of your collarbones and your long limbs and your quick, helpless gasp. I hardly lasted a minute. It was not easy, riding day after day with you in my lap. Do you know what I mean by how not conventional the description of Una's sexuality and her arousal is? I haven't read that much romantasy, right? But I would wager that not many popular romantasy books out there, especially not straight romantasy books, have written that the female main character in the main relationship is aroused by their man's delicate collarbones or long limbs or helpless gasps. I'll stop rambling about that, but I'll just say I am loving the romantic aspects of the book on top of everything else. I am very interested in the redacted name in the story. There are parts where Owen remembers a girl from his childhood who, when he remembers her name, it's redacted in both the physical and the audiobook. I'm assuming that girl is Una because it's a girl he plays with under the yew tree, which is significant to both Una and Owen. But as far as I'm understanding, Owen goes back in time and meets Una after he is an adult. So I don't know how they would have interacted when they were children, but I'm assuming that's going to be explained. So I'm very interested to see what that part of the magic and the story is. I'll wrap it up really quickly by talking about the 6 deaths of the saint. I had heard several people who had loved the short story say that they were a bit disappointed in the book because there are differences. So far, I think that there are definitely similarities and influences in terms of the general premise and Una as this reluctant lady knight figure, but they are definitely different stories with different strengths, and I personally love that they are stories that stand on their own and can be enjoyed as separate things. But I am concerned because The 6 Deaths of the Saint didn't have a happy ending. It definitely had a tragic, bittersweet sort of conclusion to the story, and I really want Owen and Una to have a happier ending than that, but I suspect that Harrow is not going to give that to me. Alright, end of the spoiler section. That's enough. I feel like I have been rambling at just this midway point forever, and I don't know how long this vlog is going to end up being. I'm so sorry if it's super long. I have no idea if anyone's even going to want to watch it. I'm going to keep on reading, and to be so real with you, I'm probably going to end up finishing this book by tomorrow. If I have time and if it makes sense, I'll try to come in for a check-in at the 75%-ish mark, but no promises. I might end up just blasting through this, and the next time you see me might be at the end of the book once I finished everything. Hey, mister. Hey, handsome. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear me over the wind, but this is Mr. Udo, who I am riding. He's the horse I lease. I've been riding horses since I was about 7 years old, so for the vast majority of my life I've been riding, and I only recently last year moved my riding to this new stable, and I started leasing Udo, and I've been loving it. Growing up, we only really had an indoor ring and an outdoor ring to ride in, and there wasn't really an option to ride outside or anything like that. I mean, there was a trail at the other place, but it almost never got used. But here I ride outside basically anytime I can, and I love it, and Udo loves it. Right, mister? Yeah, Udo's super cool. When he was younger, he used to do all the big stuff. If you know horses and you know jumping and things like that, he used to do 6-bar, big stadium jumping and stuff like that. But he's an older guy now, so we don't do anything crazy, but we just love coming outside and cantering through the fields and stuff like that. So, and of course, literally every time that I'm doing it, I pretend I'm in some sort of fantasy novel, and the scene in Lord of the Rings when Arwen is riding and trying to get Frodo to Rivendell away from the wraiths. That's the music that's playing in my head pretty much every time that I'm riding Udo. So but right now I'm pretending I am a lady knight Una riding through a fantasy romance novel. So yeah, so I hope you can hear any or all of that. Like I said, it's kind of windy outside, so the audio might not pick up well, and if it doesn't, I'll just do a voiceover. But yeah, here is a little tour of me riding Mr. Udo.
Teapot. He has extra toes. His extra toes. And that's Mr. Big.
Can you hear her little purrs? I'm trying to get some clips of her purring. I'm here with Lucy Girl to give you what I hope is going to be a quick update. I am at the 75% mark, and I don't know how I'm going to talk about this or talk about any of my thoughts without spoilers at this point, because we're so far into the plot that anything that I'm updating you on is going to be a spoiler. So maybe if you are worried about spoilers, skip this section and go to the final check-in where I will do the spoiler-free section and spoiler section. But right now, I'm just going to talk about my thoughts. And you are warned, there may be spoilers. Actually, I know there will be spoilers. I just have to pet this little head. It's so distracting because you're so freaking cute. And I love you so much. I'm going to try and keep it kind of quick, but I feel like I'm going to end up rambling a bit. So since the midway check-in, like I said, I'm now at about 3/4 of the way through, and I feel like both so much has happened and also not much has happened. I don't mean that negatively or positively. I just think that in the first half of the book, we were building this cyclical kind of momentum with the repeated lives as we are getting introduced to characters and sort of the bones of the story and the magic of these reincarnations and repeated lifetimes. Where I had left off at the last check-in is that I just finished Una's point of view and we were switching back to Owen's point of view. So I left off at chapter 14, and basically for the next 40-ish pages, we have no Una. It's just Owen and Owen learning a lot about why and sort of how he and Una have been living these repeated lives. And it's not a super long book. This is only about 300 pages, so 40 pages of separation felt to me pretty significant. They are an important 40 pages because in those pages, Owen learns that Vivian, who is the Minister of War in his time, is actually the same person as Yvain, who is the queen that Una has been serving. There was never a Queen Yvain. It was essentially always Vivian, and she was traveling and basically building up the legend of Una and Yvain and the founding of Dominion in order to manipulate history and create this propaganda that she could use in present time to give herself power as the Minister of War, and eventually I think she is hoping to become queen. Every time that she has sent Owen back to the past and forced him and Una to love each other and then lose each other and live these repeatedly tragic lives, she has been making little tweaks here and there in order to change the outcome in her present or, the future, so that she can essentially craft a world where she has more power. And it's just infuriating. To her, it's literally like she's playing a video game, like she's playing Sims or something, and she's just moving chess pieces in order to eventually get to the outcome that she wants. And Owen realizes this, and he does end up finding a way to get back to Una. In realizing this about Vivian and realizing how he and Una have been manipulated and used so callously, Owen has this realization that, his country, his government, Dominion, really isn't all that. I'll read a couple passages from Owen's perspective where he's thinking about Dominion and the role that he's been forced to play. I had no grand destiny or secret purpose. I was a mere byproduct of war, one of tens of thousands of orphans left by centuries of wars and crusades, and I had never been destined for anything except a shallow grave on the banks of Crown River, which was once called the Marrow. With this thought came a great clarity. Everything I had believed in and fought for, crown and country, the flag and the church, even the past itself, had proved false. What remained were those trivial, nameless moments which would be swallowed up by the tide of history and forgotten. And in this section, he is thinking about Vivian and the way that she is using people. This part of the speech was, I understood, intended to make her cause more sympathetic to me. to recast the last few centuries of bloodshed as a noble struggle towards justice, but all I could see was your face as you died, over and over. Was it a ladder she had climbed or a pile of bodies? Was it justice if it only served one person? I do really like that we're exploring the corruptive nature of power and the way that, again, people and bodies and lives are used to further propaganda, to further a country, to further a government that at the end of the day does not really care who lives or dies. I will say that after about 40 pages of that, though, I was kind of feeling like, all right, Alex, I get it. I understand what you are saying. I mentioned this already in my midway checkpoint, but I was already getting that message just from seeing the way that Una was being treated and the way that people were reacting to her and how that was so different from what Owen had learned about growing up as, Una being this revered figure. So even without all of this sort of explicitly laid out for me and with Owen saying these things, I was already getting the message. So I didn't really feel like I needed 40 pages of that to be rehashed so explicitly. I don't know if in the last bit we're going to learn more about Vivian or if she's going to be humanized at all. But I think in really trying to get this sort of message about propaganda and government and corruption across, Vivian is sort of towing into the line of being a bit of a caricature of a villain for me. She still has a layer of complexity, and she talks about being a woman and how she knew that she was capable, but being a woman made it very hard for her to get respect or to get any sort of power. But it does feel like in her interactions with Owen and Una, especially now knowing that she is the mastermind behind all of their suffering, she is just kind of coming across as the evil big bad that they have to outrun, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But I would love it if we got a bit more from Vivian. I would love if just there was a bit more that made me feel like I understood what she was doing. Not necessarily that it is justified or that I would empathize with it, but yeah, a little more complexity would be great. So we'll see if that happens. But really, those few things are my only qualms right now. I'm otherwise still really loving the book. Owen uses the magic, which I don't know if I've mentioned, but it happens in the form of a book. There is a book that is supposed to be about Una Everlasting, and by putting his blood on it, he is able to travel back to her. And they decide that instead of living out the legend, they're going to run. They use the book to flee to different points in time so that Vivian can't catch them and force them to relive the legend. And it's just so beautiful and heartbreaking because they do realize and admit their feelings for each other, and we get a bit of spice, which was so beautifully done. I also really like this passage that I'm going to read you where Harrow is describing Una and Owen as they are fleeing and hiding and taking on different disguises. They left even their sexes behind, dressing sometimes as 2 men or 2 women, binding or stuffing their chests, lengthening or shortening their stride. This at least came easily to them, for neither of them had ever quite been what they were supposed to be or acted how they ought to act. They were too manly or too womanish, too loud or too soft-spoken, too tall or too slim, too strong or too weak. It was no hardship to trade one disguise for another. It's not that that's new information. We know that Una has, a complicated relationship with her femininity and doesn't always feel very womanish. And there have been descriptions of Owen that I have read and talked about where he has a lot of feminine qualities, but to have it sort of written out and for both of them, not just Una to talk about, we don't necessarily ever feel like we are fully man or fully woman or that we fit those boxes very neatly. That passage is also on the same page as the beginning of the first spicy scene that we get between these two. I thought that the sex between these two was written so tenderly and so well, and I had mentioned in the other check-in how I really appreciated the way that Una's sexuality and the things that she was aroused by and the way that her arousal sort of presented had more traditionally masculine qualities, and I think that it translated really well into them actually being intimate with each other, and I just think that it was so beautifully done. I'll read you a little bit, and it's not super explicit or anything like that, but if you're someone who doesn't want to hear spice or anything sensual or sexual, then I guess skip this part. Then he lay back and pulled her astride him. She took him deeply and not gently, the way he liked best, his wrists pinned, his pulse beating frantic in his throat. She rode him until he arced beneath her and came, shouting her name so loudly against the dark that she knew she had not quite yet, disappeared. While Una and Owen are in hiding, they end up making a home for themselves, and they actually have 2 children. I don't know, I just thought that whole part where they are starting a family was really lovely, especially because Una grapples with whether or not she can be a mother, whether she wants to be a mother. And she is trying to balance missing her past and her capability and sort of her renown, even though she had a very complicated relationship with the legend of Una. there comes a point in the story after they've had their first child together where Una is in a position where she has to choose whether or not she's really going to leave that life behind or whether she still wants to retain some of that identity. Someone comes to Una and Owen for help because they've realized that Una is obviously not just some woman, she is a fighter and they need her help. But they're essentially in this situation where they are hiding Una's abilities because if word gets out that there is a tall, pale-haired woman who can fight, then it's going to make it easier for Vivian to find them. So if she decides to fight and retain that part of her identity that she has been missing, then she is putting not just herself, but now her child and Owen at risk. What I loved about that scene, though, is that Owen doesn't ask her not to do it. He lets her know, you're risking a lot, but I'm not going to be the one to tell you what you can't or can do or who you can or can't be, because we've both had enough of that in our lives, our multiple lives. So Una does decide not to take up her sword again. She is setting aside that part of her in order to protect herself, but more importantly, her family. That brings me to where I am now in the story, and I am so scared because Vivian has found them. Where I'm at in the story, Vivian has tracked them down, and I'm assuming that shit's about to hit the fan. I'm just so scared because they've made this beautiful little life for themselves with their 2 children, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm assuming that it's not going to be a happy ending. I'm going to finish this book. I might finish it today. I don't know if I'm going to have time to film my thoughts once I'm done, so I might end up doing the wrap up tomorrow. We'll see. It depends on how long it takes me to get through this and what other stuff I have to do, but I am very nervous. I'm very scared. I just want them to be happy, and my sense is that it's not going to be a happily ever after, but we will see. Whether it is later tonight or tomorrow, I will come back with my final thoughts and kind of wrap up this vlog. I only finished this book maybe 20 minutes ago, and usually I have a lot more time between finishing a book and sharing my thoughts to let my feelings kind of marinate because I think that frequently my first impressions or the way I feel about a character or plot or whatever often evolves as I let myself have some time after finishing the book. But we're not doing that today. I'm going in raw, so my thoughts might be a little bit scattered, but I want to talk about The Everlasting by Alexi Harrow and wrap up this reading vlog. I'll start with the spoiler-free section, which I feel like is going to be kind of short because at this point I don't know what I can say that's not going to be a spoiler. So I'll just give my overall impressions and my thoughts on the book overall and try and keep it very vague for the spoiler-free, obviously. Long story short, I love this book. I think that it is up there in like my top 3 romance heavy fantasies or romantasies. I don't know if at this point if people consider Song of Achilles a romantasy or not. I've heard it called a romantasy. I don't know that I would characterize it as such, but why not? If you do, it is up there among my top favorites with the Song of Achilles. I don't think that it's an absolutely perfect book. I have my notes and critiques, which I've shared some of them. For example, I thought that there was that section that dragged a bit and some of the themes and messaging, especially around the corruptive nature of power, especially in government or empire. I thought that that was a little bit overdone or heavy-handed, but I love the book. Do I still wish that maybe we had gotten some more complexity from the main antagonist a bit earlier? I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that, but maybe I could have done with some more complexity being introduced a bit earlier in the book. But overall, I really did love it. I started this book saying that I really loved Owen and Una, and to the very end, I adored those two. The way that they, as individuals, challenged so many of the very typical and overhashed and overused and recycled male-female archetypes in romantasy was just so good. The way that we got to experience queerness and the expansiveness of gender expression and sexuality and sensuality was just so wonderful, and something I don't really think that I see in romantasy. Their relationship and their romance, their sexual attraction, their sex, their dynamics, all of it just jumped clear over all of the stereotypical hetero romantasy relationships that I honestly just don't have a lot of interest in reading anymore. All of that just made my little rainbow heart so very happy, and they were, again, as people, they were intricate, they were multifaceted, they were layered, and that just made their relationship that much more interesting and easy to root for and be invested in. I think the only other popular romantasy that I've read that explores these ideas of gender expansiveness in the main relationship is Infinite Fates, Our Infinite Fates. I didn't actually end up loving that book, but I really appreciated that aspect of it. I think Alexi Harrow did an incredible job with the world building and the magic. There was a good balance of letting some things go unsaid and remain mysterious, and then building them out at a later point, but allowing the reader to piece together certain things for themselves, or to be okay being kind of confused by the mythical quality of the magic for a while. Again, I said it at the very beginning, and I continue to think to the very end that the prose was just exquisite. I think Harrow showed a good amount of agility with her writing style and employing different tones for different sections of the book. Her writing was descriptive and emotive and humorous. And yeah, like there were parts, especially towards the end, where maybe it was a little over the top or edging on purple prose, but I think it was appropriate for what I was reading, and it's not like it took me out of it. I still really loved it. Okay, now the spoiler section. Big warning, spoilers. I'm gonna give huge, big spoilers away. I said I love Una and Owen's characters a lot, and I just want to talk a little bit more about that with spoilers in this section. I just really love the way that Una was multifaceted in her gender and her sexuality, and it wasn't just that she was this big strong woman who defied all femininity. She's not just this really tough domineering woman in the streets and in the sheets. She has a lot of softness, and she grapples with her femininity. She is a mother. She loves her children. Even though she's a knight of legend, she still deals with things like objectification or being subjugated and being used. And I might risk sounding like a broken record, but I just once again love the way that Alex wrote about Una's sensuality and her sexuality, and wasn't afraid to continue challenging traditional dynamics and traditional roles of women in romantasy, even in the bedroom and even in the way that she wrote their sex scenes and their spice. It is a pet peeve of mine, which I talked about when I was reviewing the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, but I just don't like when authors, in an attempt to write a strong woman or a not traditional woman, just make her mean and violent with no nuance or complexity. I think that's a bit lazy, and it's not that interesting to me personally. I also love the arc of Owen's character from being someone who reveres and objectifies, and in the beginning is literally writing and manipulating the story of Una Everlasting, to being someone who absolutely treasures Una as a full person and really prioritizes her agency and her ability to make choices for herself in all aspects, whether that is in the romantic or sexual relationships, or in exploring the possibility of having a family, or even deciding, like I said, whether or not she really wants to lay down her sword and set aside that part of her past and identity. He leaves that up to her and leaves so much space for her to feel like she really has the power to write her own story, and I just really appreciated that. When I last left off, I had said that Owen and Una had their two children while they were in hiding from Vivian, but that Vivian had found them, and the family and the kids really killed me. It's so funny. As a person, I don't actually like kids, and I never want human children for myself. I am very happy with my fur babies. But in media, family dynamics and family relationships just get to me really hard. So Vivian finds them, and she ends up killing Una. And in that sort of altercation, Owen realizes that while Una and he thought that they were in hiding and that they had stolen these 9 years from Vivian where they could have children and have this family, Actually, that was also part of Vivian's design. She had allowed them to have that time to have these kids so that she could use them as leverage. And not only that, but she had done it multiple times. In multiple lifetimes, she had tricked Una and Owen into thinking that they had this bit of paradise, that they had this peace and moment of family and joy, only to rip it from them again and again. So in this scene, Vivian is forcing Owen to die and leave his children behind so that he can be reborn and do another version of the tale of Una so that she can use that for her own political machinations. And this is the scene where he is saying goodbye to his children. I ran my hands over the sharp wings of our daughter's shoulders and the downy nape of our son's neck. The body remembers. You're going to disappear for a little while. It won't hurt. It'll be like going to sleep. And one day, when your mother and I find you again, you'll wake up and all of this will be a bad dream. I'd laid them down among the roots where I had lain as a boy. I placed our son's hand around his sister's. They curled toward one another, fetal in their fear, forming the uneven shape of a heart. Mine, I thought, and yours. I won't give the full summary, but basically what happens is Owen is reborn, he goes back in time again, meets Una, they both remember everything that has happened and they decide to try to end the cycle. They have a final confrontation with Vivian and they use the book in which Owen has been repeatedly writing the legend of Una Everlasting because they have realized that this book has been made from the wood of the yew tree that is where they always end up coming back together. It's a magical tree that is connected to both of them. So the book has been made from the tree and it's the source of the magic that allows them to do all of this. Owen uses the book to send Una and himself to the very beginning, to a time long ago before even the yew tree was a tree. Much to their shock, they actually encounter Vivian there and she reveals to them that she is the one that planted the yew tree that is the source of all this magic. She's not even from Owen's time. She is from way before all of that. I haven't really gone into it, but there are dragons in this world, and it is revealed that in a dragon's heart, there is a seed, essentially, and if you plant it into the heart of a creature out of time, then that creature can be reborn. It's the source of magic. Vivian, when she was young, was basically groomed and manipulated by this king to become pregnant and forced to have a miscarriage or stillbirth. This was all orchestrated so that the king could take the dragon heart that he had and plant it in her dead infant and use that to gain magic for himself. We find out that the stillborn child is Una, and Una is only alive because Vivian, and at this point she wasn't even called Vivian, she had a different name. She took the heart seed for herself and planted it in Una's heart so that she could be reborn, and essentially after that was found by her family and the whole legend starts. It's so messed up because yes, Vivian was used and manipulated and abused in these horrific ways, and yes, she used the magic of the dragon heart to bring Una back to life and to give her a chance at life. And then she uses it to manipulate and abuse and absolutely wreck Una's life for hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes. I mentioned in the last check-in that I felt like Vivian was a bit flat as a villain and antagonist, and it felt like I could do with a bit more humanizing, and we definitely got those humanizing elements, and I felt for her suffering, and her story was really tragic. I'm just not sure if I feel like some of those elements or some of those humanizing moments should have happened a little bit earlier. It just felt like it all came at the end. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would have been more effective spread out or how that would have even happened. Again, I haven't had enough time to think about it. I still really appreciated that that was included and that Vivian was allowed to have this backstory. If any of you have read The Six Deaths of the Saint, still can't say that name easily, but if any of you have read the short story, then the ending of that short story is more or less how this confrontation ends. Vivian is trying to use Owen's life as leverage to make Una do what she wants again, and instead of watching Una have to do this, Owen decides to set her free by killing himself so that Vivian can't use him as leverage. Una then kills Vivian, and then takes the dragon seed from Vivian and buries Owen, having planted the seed in his heart, hoping that maybe with time he will come back to her, as the legend and magic says. After Una buries Owen with the seed and she is now waiting for the tree to grow, there are a couple descriptions of her in this period that just fucking wrecked me. I'm going to read you one of the passages that describes her in this period of waiting as she is trying to protect the sapling and make sure no harm comes to it. I know it was summer, that year or the one after, when the first berry budded hard and green. I touched it with my smallest finger. I thought of our son. I know it was spring again when a storm blew in from the north, driving the swifts and the small animals ahead of it. I curled my body around the U while lightning struck so near it raised the hairs on my arms and left the taste of metal in my mouth. Oh man, for some reason, the mental image of this giant woman, this massive, capable fighter, bending her body around this tiny sapling with this desperate hope that if she protects this little plant that her love might be able to come back to her is just so heartbreaking to me. It's really interesting because I said that the ending of The Sixth Deaths of the Saint is very similar to the ending of that final confrontation with Vivian, but the book ended on a much happier note than I expected. The short story has a very bittersweet ending, but here they actually get their happy ending because Owen does in fact emerge from the tree at a point and they are able to have their happily ever after, which I really wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to be a really bittersweet ending. In one sense, I almost wish that it wasn't quite so neatly tied off. I felt like a lot of things were wrapped up a bit too prettily, but I don't know. I guess I shouldn't complain because I wanted Owen and Una to be happy and I wanted them to be with their kids again, and I got that. So like, shouldn't complain. I wasn't expecting it. In the very, very last section of the book, we find out that as they live a new life together, Una basically becomes a different legendary figure. It's not Una the Everlasting. She's now called the Green Knight, and she has a different story. She has a different legacy. I'll read you a little portion describing their life together. Yes, there are children, a son and a daughter as before, as always. On the day her son was born, the Green Knight turned his left foot in her hand. When she saw the birthmark there, as round and red as a yewberry, she cried and pressed her lips to the mark. Woo! And Una even gets her horse back. I can't believe I haven't even mentioned Hen in this whole vlog so far, but she has this ornery, dangerous, violent horse named Hen who is very loyal to her, and I was so happy to see that he got to join them at the end. So I think it is safe to end the spoiler section by just saying that I really enjoyed this book. I'm not gonna cry. Even though I had critiques here and there, I just thought that it was such a beautiful story that was beautifully written and had beautiful, complex human characters who the author was not afraid to write in a way that stepped absolutely beyond the bounds of what traditional mainstream romantasy considers to be a typical and marketable romance. There were parts of it that absolutely wrenched my heart and made me want to fling my body into the sun as I was just so heartbroken and moved by aspects of it. I don't think that it was a perfect book, and I am still noodling a bit on what I want to rate it. Is this my 5-star romantasy? I'm just so precious with my 5 stars. A lot of times what happens is I'll give a book 4.5 stars, and as I sit on it, I'll be like, no, that's definitely a 5-star. And right now it's either a 4.5 or a 5-star, but I can't decide right now. I don't know. I don't know. I just can't commit right now. I'm trying to decide if the things that I loved about this book and if the emotional impact of the book is enough to kind of negate things I didn't like about it. I think for now I will err on the side of being generous and say that this is my 5-star romantasy read, and if in my monthly wrap-up I knock it down to 4.5, nobody come for me. I still really, really love this book. To close out my very first reading vlog, which I feel like is going to end up being way too long, I just want to thank everyone for sticking with me as I read Wild Reverence and The Everlasting. I had suspected that if I was going to find a 5-star romantasy out of these two, it was going to be The Everlasting, and turns out that my suspicions were correct. I didn't love The Wild Reverence, as you know, and I will probably sell my copy, but I'm still glad I read it. If you have any other recommendations for romantasies that you think I might enjoy based on what I've talked about and the things that I seem to enjoy, please leave them in the comments. I am still on the hunt for a good romantasy because I love love. I love good love stories, and I want to be emotional over beautiful couples, beautiful romance. As this is my first vlog, I'm sure there are going to be things that I have to iron out, and I would love to get your feedback, but please be gentle. I think that my preference is generally going to be to include behind the scenes. I had a poll on my channel asking if people preferred me to include things like behind the scenes clips or not, and the vast majority said that you like behind the scenes clips, and that's good because that is my preference and probably what I would have done anyway, to be honest. I love sharing little bits of my day and sharing things like me riding Udo or hanging out with my rats and Lucy. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. But if you have any feedback on maybe if you would like less behind the scenes, more behind the scenes, voiceovers, whatever, let me know and I will take it all into consideration for whatever my next reading vlog is, which I do have one planned that I am hoping that I can film and edit for next month. There is such a good chance that this vlog is going to end up being over 2 hours long, in which case I am so sorry. So sorry it's so long. Thank you if you have managed to stick it out and make it through the whole thing. I appreciate you. Whether you watch some or all of it, thank you so much for being here. Happy reading. I will see you in the next one. Bye.